AU's African Union's Agenda 2063 and the European Commission's Africa Strategy. And both these documents, they're almost complementary in a sense that they're looking at the same, they have the same broad objectives around socio-economic transformation of both the continents of Europe and Africa. So this is where we largely get our context in terms of future collaboration. Next one, Murray. So we have a term here at the Council for Geoscience where it's saying that geoscience is the fulcrum for human development, and it really is. We all share and live in one home, planet Earth, and our shared vision then must be around making sure that this home that we call Earth, we use the resources that it provides sustainably. Now, science and technology, and in this case, geoscience, can play a fundamental role in observing those objectives that are listed in the two documents. So we're all looking at green transition, and this just transition, it's really towards a low carbon economy. And it is deeply rooted in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So we want to use science to inform the policy direction going forward. Next one, Murray. So what are we looking at? Geoscience, as I mentioned, it underpins pretty much everything that we do. And we look at when we're looking at issues around water security, we look towards geoscience. Where are the next water resources? Issues around agricultural sustainability, energy security, and raw materials availability. And this one is really important, particularly to Europe. Africa has these minerals, and the whole world, including Africa, needs these minerals. How can we sustainably use them? How can we sustainably exploit them? And in addressing that, we need geoscientific input. We all talk about these minerals of the future, battery technologies, and they're quite necessary for decarbonization, if you like. Africa has, and Europe, is surrounded by a huge marine environment. And geoscientific information is critical in understanding and how we can unlock that blue economy. We are all plagued by several geohazards, whether it's earthquakes, volcanoes, subsidence. The continent of Africa and Europe has similar problems. In order to address those problems, we look towards geoscience in terms of understanding the rocks, and possibly even predicting where some of these geohazards, when they could occur. We can't talk about geoscience without climate change, and that is obviously a huge part of decarbonizing the planet. We need geoscientific input. Murray?
Yeah, so I'll take over for a minute. Geoscience really is crucial to the survival of both continents. And I've used this illustration just of the Earth and an apple. Most people don't realize how small the amount of our planet is that can support life. So right now, we understand that life can survive, at least some life, up to the troposphere, 19 kilometers above us. And it extends down to at least 5 kilometers below, maybe even a little bit below that. But nonetheless, that's a total thickness of about 26 kilometers circling the globe. And the Earth's diameter is 12,742 kilometers. So the part of the globe that actually supports life, everything that we do, is incredibly small. And understanding the geoscience of this very thin band around our planet is clearly what's crucial to preserving a viable biosphere going forward. So again, I'm going to emphasize some of the things that David just talked about. Why geoscience? A lot of societally based science and engineering needs geoscience, the resources, soil and water for food, energy, raw materials, hazards, which affect us all in different ways in different places, and sort of a public good. Public understanding of the home we live on an appreciation for how we can treat it so it can help us back. Not only that, just like AERAP is addressing huge questions in science, geoscience also has some curiosity-driven, huge, big questions. Things like the history of the planet, the origin of life on the planet, and very important for understanding the climate and biodiversity crises, the interaction of the geophysical, geochemical, and biological cycles on the planet. And I see multiple opportunities for Africa and the EU to work together. We need to build critical intellectual capital together because we both have different things to add, very important things. Acquire the data needed to understand, to mitigate, and adapt to climate change, the green transition, and develop sustainable methods for discovery and use of raw materials of all types. So, geoscience to enable a Green Deal. If we're going to reach the 2050 goals of actually doing what we want with the Green Deal, we need accurate, reliable, Earth-related data, plus a very step change in the digital environment to empower every citizen in both continents to aid in producing sustainable growth, creating new jobs, and providing more virtual mobility. So geosciences are critical to address the socioeconomic and the just transition challenges associated with the Green Deal in both continents. So understanding geohazards stemming from climate change will be critical because they're going to increase, and ensuring the natural resources required for both our societies to both mitigate and adapt to climate change. Dave?
Yeah, thanks. So we know that geoscience in its nature is a very data intensive undertaking. So when you collect whether it's geophysical data or it's hyperspectral data, it is quite data intensive. So not only do we need the infrastructure to collect the data, to store the data, but perhaps even more critically, we need cutting edge infrastructure to process and interpret that data. So if you're looking at continental scale, developing continental scale models, for example, all of that require infrastructure that needs to be supported both in Africa and Europe. And the ICT infrastructure, developing high performance computing centers for processing these detailed data sets. That's quite critical. Now we now moving or in an era where we're looking at issues around machine learning, artificial intelligence, robotics. All of those are quite data intensive undertaking. And this partnership then seeks to develop those infrastructure capabilities, particularly for a younger generation, in particular women. We need the support. Africa as a continent is a relatively young continent if you look at the age profile, and it's critical to support the younger generation. So we're also looking at issues around citizen science. Africa as a continent, I think that there's more mobile phones in Africa than anywhere else. And that provides us with a very good opportunity to implement some of the key citizen science projects between the two continents. Next one, Murray. So we're not starting from scratch, and I'm glad to see Jean-Claude in the audience. The EU and Africa has been implementing this program called PanAfGeo over the last couple of years. And it has largely been a training program where young scientists from all over Africa are trained in specific methods, specific techniques. And this includes training provided by experts from Europe. So we are not starting from scratch. I think this program has laid the foundation. So what we need to move towards then is the implementation phase. So using, for example, that ICT infrastructure in developing some of these and then processing some of these key data sets. This program has really provided the platform in which to develop these ideas. Next one, Murray. So PanAfGeo has been implemented by the Organization of African Geological Surveys in partnership with the European Geological Surveys, led by Jean-Claude. And we have really laid the foundation on how both continents can leverage on the applications of geoscience in addressing some of these sustainable development goals. Next one, Murray. So the OAGS is a community of African Geological Surveys. Its counterpart in Europe, the European Geological Surveys. So it's made up of a number of geological surveys from various countries. And its mandate is really to develop partnerships between the African Geological Surveys and our international partners. And we'd like to use geoscience in particular to address some of these societal challenges. So we want to use these sort of programs as an investment attracting vehicle, if you like, and demonstrating the application of geoscience in economic development. Next one, Murray. So the Council for Geoscience, we're based in South Africa. We're one of the state agencies. We have various offices around South Africa, and we have implementing multiple projects within the African continent. We have quite a young staff profile made up of a lot of geoscientists, and we are really proud of some of the work that we're doing and that we're hoping can be expanded both in the African continent and in Europe as well. Next, Murray.
Thank you, David. So just like you're talking about the Organisation of African Geological Surveys, and you actually mentioned it, we have an equivalent capacity in Europe known as EuroGeo Surveys. So this is an organisation, a not-for-profit organisation representing 38 national geological surveys and also some regional surveys across Europe. And it represents an overall workforce of several thousand experts. The members, which are the national surveys, are all public sector institutions with a long tradition, in many cases over 100 years, of carrying out operations and research in the field of the geosciences. Some of the focus areas are on and offshore natural resources, for example, energy, including renewable geothermal energy, minerals, water and soils, natural hazards of geological origin, environmental management, waste management, urban development, sustainable urban development, access to geoscientific metadata and data, and this is very important. They do develop an interoperable and harmonized geoscientific data set at European scale, which is available through their portal. In iCRAG, we work very closely with our own geological survey, Geological Survey Ireland, who are members of this consortium. So to talk a little bit about iCRAG, iCRAG is the Science Foundation Ireland Research Centre in Applied Geosciences. We comprise of over 150 researchers at present at various levels in the geosciences, biosciences, engineering, and also social sciences. We are supported by Science Foundation Ireland, which is Ireland's national science funder, the European Regional Development Fund, Geological Survey Ireland, and also a range of international and national industry partners. At present, we currently work with over 70 partner companies across a very wide range of projects. We have 85 active projects at the moment that span a wide range of the geosciences, such as energy security, groundwater security, marine, geohazards, and minerals research. And our overall aim really is to develop innovative science and technologies to better understand the Earth's past, present, and future, and importantly, how people are connected to it. Next slide, please. Thanks, Murray. So just to talk a little bit about some of our activity in Africa, we have a number of projects over the last number of years in Africa. So we have had at least 18 of our academics or investigators involved in over 20 projects. across 15 different countries in Africa. So you can see on the map where these are. So we have long-standing relationships with Africa. Next slide, please, Murray. And very much like AERAP, iCRAG, which has a focus very much on being a significant part of the delivery of the Sustainable Development Goals and the decarbonisation agenda, as Murray has referred to. We also present a ready-made critical mass and an existing model for contributing to the Africa-EU green transition through our geoscience research. And this will help strengthen not only our, the science, technological and innovative collaborations, but also the digital transformation and importantly, our human capital capacity. Over to you, David.
Excellent, thanks. So we are hoping that we could use geoscience to provide some of the fundamental questions or to provide answers to some of the fundamental questions about our planet, understand its mechanisms, its workings, broadly on a research level. But probably much more importantly is to use that knowledge to answer some of the societal issues that we have. Next one, Murray. All right, so you can go ahead, Murray.
Oh, I think this is you. I think this is you, Dave, for geodesy and geodynamics.
Yeah, no, that's fine. You can move on to the next slide.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a couple of programs that we are proposing, hoping to implement. One of them is geodesy and geodynamics, and this is quite a fundamental scientific undertaking that can be undertaken both within the African continent and Europe. Now, using geodetic very long baseline interferometry, we can use that information to understand the geodynamic mechanisms between the European and African tectonic plates. And that is quite important in a sense that not only would we have a good understanding broadly of how the planet operates, but we can make some of the improvements to the current international celestial and terrestrial reference frames. Now, the African continent in particular is quite critical, particularly for coverage within the Southern Hemisphere. And we think that by looking at these VLBI measurements, we can understand the deformation mechanisms of both the European and African plates. And that will contribute very nicely to understanding some of the geohazards that we've been talking about in terms of seismicity, earthquakes. Next one, Murray. So there's a number of established space agencies that are located within the African continent. Europe, represented by the European space agencies. And we think that it is through this collaboration between these space agencies that we can form detailed collaborative agreements so that we can conduct these geodetic measurements to understand the tectonics between the two continents. Next one, Murray.
Okay, well, I'll jump in. Another big geoscience opportunity in Africa-EU cooperation is really on critical raw materials, which are needed for the green transition. And we need to understand, we need to do research to better understand the controls on Africa's richest mineral districts, which supply much of the world with the needed minerals, to define new models for mineral exploration and mining to aid in meeting the demands going forward. And those demands are from both continents. So another allied one is the critical raw materials needed for IT infrastructure itself. So I just wanted to highlight this, that most people think of IT infrastructure and they actually don't think what it's made of. We call a lot of it the cloud. And so people think of, clouds in the sky, right? But in fact, the cloud is actually made of metal, which is sort of an interesting thought. It's quite heavy, and it depends on all these critical minerals to actually make the world's IT virtual network go. Without those metals, I shudder to think what the last 12 months with the pandemic would have been like. So I just wanted to change our perspective a bit. We all tend to look at the world from a particular point of view, but I think sometimes we need to look at it differently, and new things come into view. So Southern Africa, for most people out there, probably isn't considered the cutting edge of science, but in fact, through AERAP, it actually really is, right? It is a scientific leader in many ways. And Europe is not thought of as a source of critical raw materials. But again, that's not strictly true. Sweden actually provides 10% of the world's tellurium, which is critical for all those solar panels we're building all over the planet. So in both cases, you know, our established thinking is maybe not quite right. So as we move on to the green transition, I think we need to keep these different perspectives in view. Heating and cooling and light are clearly forms of energy that we need both in urban environments and rural environments. And we need to address them in both continents on our journey to decarbonization. The same with communications. This is a picture I took several years ago in the middle of Mauritania. I'm standing on a very high sand dune in the middle of the Sahara. And when I climbed up to the top to do the same thing this individual did, I was trying to get a cell phone signal. So here we are in the middle of one of the world's biggest deserts. You can't see anyone for miles, yet we're using our communications to be able to talk to anyone on the planet. Quite amazing. And in terms of transportation, well, different types of vehicles. There's Tesla up there, and then there's one of South Africa's beautifully painted electric powered buses. But all these types of transportation have to deal with different kinds of transport networks. I've shown on the bottom there a typical street scene in the Democratic Republic of the Congo where I work. We're going to have to think smart on how we actually take the new transportation and move it into a way that will work in both continents. And agriculture, reducing CO2 emissions, but increasing food production and delivery is going to be one of the most critical tasks going forward. So in terms of the green transition, AERAP Geoscience is going to be essential for many, many things, but it's also for the environmental justice and for dealing with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We're both on the journey to decarbonization, but we are starting from different places. Geoscience is needed as part of the Africa-EU partnership to ensure that we successfully address all of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So a plan for 2022 to 2027 for an Africa-EU infrastructure for geoscience. We need to utilize the synergies between the African and the European geological surveys, as we have done in the past, and other research consortia to develop the IT infrastructure and the AI for big data. Real-time environmental sensors and monitors over both continents to help us understand what's really happening with both the climate and biodiversity. And really importantly, the human capital, including designated funding for development of young women geoscientists and young researchers. And all this is needed to provide support for water security, agricultural sustainability, energy security, raw materials availability, the circular economy, the blue economy, and community safety from geohazards, including climate change. The beneficiaries of this work and this research will be the Green Deal, national, regional, local government, both policymakers, land use planners, and regulators, local communities for resource use and hazard protection, academia and the NGOs who will use the data in many, many ways, and industry, specifically construction, raw materials production, and waste management. And we're thinking a significant budget is needed over the lifetime to actually address these issues and make them so they go to scale and make a real difference. So with that, I'm going to ask Declan to come back in. I think Juan's coming. So I will exit my computer and hopefully Juan can take over.
Thank you so much, Murray. That was fabulous, very informative. And Juan Miguel, do I hear you?
Yes, here I am.
You're very welcome, Juan Miguel.
Hello, friends.
So can you share?
Yeah. In the meantime, I would like to thank you so much for inviting us to be here, being part of the geoscience community. Congratulate for the previous presentations. for sure, on giant shoulders. Excellent presentations. As well, Dan the tweet comment mentioning explicitly mentioning like what Eric, as based on the fact that we are a research infrastructure based on how to engage the different biodiversity. I love what you say, Murray, about crisis, biodiversity crisis, and David, all of you, Jennifer, that's clear. We are experiencing a clear biodiversity crisis, and geodiversity is very related to biodiversity. So I will share my.
And just while you are, Juan Miguel, it would be remiss of me if I didn't welcome Francesco Colomar, I believe is here. Francesco?
Yes, hello.
Hello. And Francesco, everybody is the Director General at JIVE.
Right.
And since we've had such fascinating references to space and interferometry, I really feel we have to remark on Francesco's presence here today, and again from the point of view of the science, but also JIVE is a European Union research infrastructure, the so-called ESRI research infrastructure. So another example we're going to hear now from Juan Miguel and life sciences. So again, very interesting, as a number of speakers have pointed out, to the broader principle of research infrastructure, but then also I think it's just by way of helping everybody understand how stuff works. Then we have the more formal ESRI process. And of course, from a layman standpoint, these are invariably, data enabled and data driven. And I think this is hugely important. So Francesco, just would you like to wish us a happy new year and tell us what's big on JIVE this year before Juan Miguel joins us?
Absolutely. Well, I actually, happy new year to everybody, that's for sure. And best wishes. I have written in the chat a little bit about this BLBI, this radio astronomy network that has applications for geosciences, and that has an element in South Africa, that is the Hartevestok Radio Astronomy Observatory. So I am very much willing to expand on this if it is found interesting. Thank you very much, Declan.
Thank you so much, Francesco. Juan Miguel, the screen is entirely yours, and we're delighted you're able to join us here today and looking forward to what you're going to show us. Okay, thank you very much. So this is, can you see my screen? No, it's right, no? Okay. Perfect. So the idea is the following one. Here I'm representing like Watch Eric as Chief Technology Officer, but at the same time, the ERIC Forum, that is the cluster of all the ERICs, or the European Research Infrastructure Consortium, the ENVRI, Environmental Cluster. It is not about only biodiversity, but also very related to EPOS, for instance, that is related to geology, geophysics, volcanology, etc., in a very inter and multidisciplinary way, because complex problems must be tackled in a complex way, in an inter and multidisciplinary way. Having said that, why are we here today, invited by you, by Declan? First of all, because as you know, where there is a joint communication to the European Parliament and the Council related towards a comprehensive strategy with Africa. And in particular, first chapter paragraphs is related to establishing a partnership for green transition and energy access. So that, joining my colleague and friend Georgina Ryan, Deputy Director for the Green Economy Department of the Science and Innovation of the Republic of South Africa, we have established an AERAP group of Green Deal, and we have released a document in regards on how to explore extensive synergies between Africa and Europe, science, technology, and innovation collaboration. We are very honored to be part of this adventure. Thank you very much again. So, in that sense, biodiversity is very related to the Green Deal plans, the European Union Green Deal plans. And in that sense, like what Eric, the eScience European Infrastructure for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Research is a European distributed infrastructure, e-infrastructure, focusing on the ICT, on the provision of the state of art of ICT, focus on measure the impact of global climate change issues on Earth, biodiversity, and ecosystem research. From the perspective of the European research area, the area, as well, in addition, we would like to support policy decision-making, addressing societal challenges which demand scientific knowledge in a global climate change context, including citizen science activities. Having said that, alone, no, with friends, we are very connected to IPBES, the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity, Ecosystem,
services, Sustainable Development Goals 2030, JIVE, Global Biodiversity Information Facility, Research Data Alliance, Copernicus, Green Deal, and last but not least, the European Open Science Club. As Declan mentioned in right in focusing on the importance of data and software fairness. And not only, there are a lot of them, I could not finish today. So going to the point, in order to accomplish Sustainable Development Goals and guaranteeing human well-being, human and nature well-being, it's important to understand what is going on. It's very important to understand ecosystem function and services and to provide the proper ecosystem services. This is a matrix when you can identify all the main Sustainable Development Goals and how we are mapping according to those ecosystem services. Why? Because we need to assess and monitor the ecosystem functions, the ecological processes, and the biodiversity upon human well-being dependence on. So we need to understand the biodiversity, ecological processes, their functions, and how to provide the proper sustainable ecosystem services for the benefit of the human kind, but also having to account that if everything goes well, we are moving towards a new socioeconomic model, or should be establish a new socioeconomic model related to ecosystem services in order to understand environment limits, ecosystem resilience. And because of that, we need to understand, and sorry to insist, because I saw in a previous presentation a slide, understanding. Basically, David said that we need to understand what is going on, the relationships among biodiversity and essential ecosystem services. That is clear. So that from the point of view of the global biodiversity informatics outlook defined by our colleagues Hovern et al. And others, identified 20 components as essential biodiversity informatics. So there are 4 layers you can see here: culture, data, evidence, and understanding. Like what is on the top. We need we are dealing with multi-scale spatial modeling, trends and predictions, modeling biological system, visualization and dissemination, progressive new data capture, given in the form of two specific products, what is called a virtual research environment and a blockchain system, not only for traceability or accounting data issues, but also in order to put value to the socioeconomic aspects related to ecosystem services. So that, going to the point, biodiversity and geoscience connections. Which are those connections? It is clear for all of us, or should, that geodiversity affects biodiversity, shaping landscapes, species distribution, and therefore ecosystem services. Response to climate change and sea level rise will depend on geomorphological processes and their ability to resist change. I try to do my best to put in a single paragraph the importance of geodiversity. It cannot exist biodiversity without understanding. We cannot understand biodiversity without understanding what is going on with geodiversity. At the same time, for that reason, it's very important for this understanding what is going on, being based on data, but also is services fair. This data fairness must be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And considering micro, meso, and macro scale contexts, ecosystems, the scale factors are very important here. Not only the challenge of the heterogeneity of the data, that's clear for all of you, but also how to connect the different scales. And this implies a lot of sensors, remote sensing, satellite images, etc. And so that we, since 10 almost, if I remember well, 15 years ago, we are highly actively collaborating with EuroGeo, that is the European chapter for the Group of Earth Observations Biodiversity Network worldwide, you know very well, specialized or being focused on what is related to biodiversity. Let me remind you that giving awards by all the current and former Secretary Generals from the United Nations, we must challenge climate change skeptics who deny the facts, understanding our planet, just the geoscience understanding of everything. And for that reason, remote sensing and Earth observation support the geopolitical scope in order to allow to compare different geopolitical scenarios in different parts of the world and facilitating the development of Europe-Africa cooperation. So I will add your logos from previous presentations to these ones we are collaborating from Lightwatch Eric and from the Embricaster, Nuosa, Yvonne, Copernicus, Galileo, also observatory, and we would like to be part of the family of this overall Space for Sustainable Development Goal group. So that from the point of view of the biodiversity, we have tried to do our best in previous experiences, and for our contribution to the preservation of how to link of wildlife community and how to understand those geodiversity processes to better understand what is going on to biodiversity. Sorry to remark and to insist in the reasoning. We are not starting from scratch. We would like to count on what is existing, and there are already existing initiatives in which, like what Sheriff, you can see this new component piece. We would like to be a way to vertebrate as research infrastructure, as Dan the tool say, a new way to vertebrate to join all these pieces from the point of view of research infrastructures and Green Deal, in particular Green Deal issues. So this is the last slide, how we can contribute. From a strategic point of view, it should be interesting to establish a small but very selective geoscience group committee. It is existing right now. This is something obvious. Second, not reinventing the wheel. The geoscience community is still there. And in addition, at the same time, to take benefit of the best practices. Let me tell you and congratulate Declan, Francisco, Colomer, also more friends there, because they excellent work performed in JIVE, SCA, in relation to Africa, as Francisco previously mentioned. Let's not reinvent the wheel. There are existing infrastructure we can consolidate, and Lightwatch can support them in order to provide, from the operational point of view, the proper virtual research environment, and over the top of that virtual research environment, to create a concrete pilot study case on EU-Africa geoscience, biodiversity and ecosystem sustainable management, because we need you. We need the geoscience, we need the geodiversity. We need to understand this complexity related, and in particular in African continent, in collaboration. There are a lot of expectations right now because of the last political events happen. You know better than me what I'm talking about. So I think this is a very, very nice opportunity. And just to say, to finish, let me tell that this is addressed to new generations. Next time I promise to put a EU-Africa, let's say, picture. This is from my former high school, because we must think in the future, in the people, the young people coming together. We need to guarantee the future of our planet together, taking into account maybe the best generation with the best skills on ICT, on geodiversity, on biodiversity ever. So that is thank you very much. And this is our contribution and our enthusiasm to support all of this from the point of view of our research infrastructure focus on biodiversity, that I insist is nothing without geoscience, as part of the geoscience, without geodiversity to tackle, to deal with, to understand what is going on this biodiversity crisis. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Juan Miguel.
Thank you very much, sir.
Really superb. Thank you for that. Yes, there will be new generations, but unfortunately there won't be new planets.
Yeah, absolutely.
Same one.
Yeah, indeed.
Same one. So as Murray had told me, there's no planet B.
Yeah.
So, but on a constructive note, really just Murray, if I could ask you for any brief reactions to what Juan Miguel has presented, or.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, Juan Miguel, that was a brilliant presentation. I'd never actually thought of just geodiversity equal and biodiversity in the same way. So, and it's so obvious when you say it. It just totally makes sense. So it's a concept I've been struggling with how to pull it into my head and make it, something that we could deal with, and you've done it. There's no question that the two go together. And that's why the climate and the biodiversity crises have to be considered together. They're actually the same crisis, right? And we have to tackle them jointly.
Well said, Murray. Just since we do have a few minutes, do any of the participants wish to ask any of the presenters a question? Excellent. Well, listen, I know it's a Friday afternoon.
Declan?
Yes.
George here.
George, yes.
I just
sorry,
want
everybody, just I'd like to formally welcome George Miley, who is a stalwart of many things, but chief amongst them, in my experience, has been his early, enthusiastic, and constant support for the EU-Africa dialogue and wider collaboration process on science, and I'm eternally grateful.
That's very kind of you, Declan.
Oh, you know that.
But I found today these combination of really great talks extremely inspiring. Thanks to you and to everybody who's given them. I don't know if one could get a copy of the slides. I would really like if that was possible. But what I wanted to say was that David, Francisco, and Juan Miguel pointed out the role of very long baseline interferometry of distant radio sources in advancing geodesy with organizations like JIVE, VLBI, SKA, etc. But there is another, I'd like to just mention some additional synergies between radio astronomy and geosciences, in particular solar physics, space weather, ionospheric physics are all important effects that in climate change. And radio astronomy at low frequencies is plagued by the ionospheric scintillations. One person's plague is another person's playground. And I do think radio interferometry can provide unique diagnostics of the changing sun and monitoring of the ionosphere. The other thing is we use similar technologies in geosciences and in astronomy. Very advanced image processing is extremely important in astronomy. ICT, LOFAR, for example, is a ICT telescope. It doesn't have dishes anymore. It's done with ICT. Also AI plays a big role. And again, I think in geosciences, that's also the case. And we've had an astronomy for development program to advance the SDGs led by an office in South Africa since 2010. So my point is that it might be useful to explore specific synergetic projects that might provide a whole that's greater than the sum of the parts and maybe help sell both fields to relevant fund givers. So that was what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much for that, George. Really, really pertinent. Fully welcome that suggestion, and we will be taking it forward in future discussions. So really, everybody, that just remains for me to thank everybody, and please consider this meeting as a process, and we will be continuing this. And Murray and his colleagues have outlined how we see this looking in terms of an infrastructure going forward, and that going forward, as everybody knows, is looking towards engagement by the European Union with Africa this year. There is a new EU-Africa strategy, which broadly addresses a range of challenges. And I suppose my perspective on those is while that's not a headline science program or strategy, science, research, and innovation will be absolutely critical to delivering on those policy objectives. And this, exactly the same is the case with respect to the United Nations SDGs, which apply everywhere without geographic distinction. So I think this year will be important for looking at those anew, and we will in particular be looking at the forthcoming EU-Africa Summit, tentatively scheduled, I believe. I don't think there's any confirmation yet, but for the April timeframe. But as soon as we have a time, then we will be presenting and moving forward with an input strategy to raise awareness of the contribution of science to that broad dialogue. And again, as a number of the speakers here have mentioned, that this needs to be understood in a global context, and really as a footnote, recognizing how science is being considered. You will know that Eric Lander has been nominated as the President's Science Advisor by President Biden. He will also be the Director of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. And two features about that. This is the first time that director of the OSTP has a cabinet seat. That's the first time it's ever happened in the history of the United States. And secondly, it's the first time a science director has been nominated prior to the inauguration. Maybe too much detail for folk there, but you know, these things, signals are important. And the reason I'm flagging it is I think, again, there's enormous scope for that in global engagement in and around science. And I would just point to that as an example of how global policy developments, do matter. And of course, there will be many of these initiated by the European Union, by the African Union, and Dan DeToy had referred to that in his introductory remarks. And again, the reason these developments are important because we have to engage with policymakers and we have to put forward what are sometimes called policy options, and meetings such as this are designed to do that. So as I said, we see this as part of an ongoing policy process, a dialogue process. So once again, thank you very much to all our contributors today. It was really wonderful to hear those presentations, to see the presentations, and I'm hoping that, and we can look at this online, that they will be available for distribution. I will certainly share the video in about, I think it takes about an hour to cook, and once it's cooked, I will be sharing the link with everybody, and hopefully it'll continue to inform us and people beyond this meeting today. And please let us look forward to working together to advance this really a multifaceted agenda. And I think that's come through. Murray highlighted the issue of women in science. We've seen the relevance and pertinence to industry. And of course, without a lot of the outputs from the data generated by these sciences, well, policymakers won't have the tools and knowledge to make policies which are going to apply in every area of society, from climate, environment, and transport and health, everywhere. So this is why our meetings here are designed to make hopefully a small contribution to that process. So again, thank you to one and all. Thank you to our audience here today. It's always a delight to have you on, although you've been very good and quiet. You've all been present on the chat, and of course we will be informing you as we move ahead. So have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe, everybody.
I want to thank you too. I've been very busy because of this inauguration. But today I was supposed to give out food pantry to the community. I just woke up. I've not been able to attend your conference, but I look forward to meet you at the UN when you come in this year. Yeah, you're doing a good job. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Teddy, for those remarks. Thank you indeed. Thanks indeed.
Thank you. God bless you. Yeah.
God bless. Take good care. Thank you, everybody. Good weekend. See you all again soon. Bye-bye.